In Georgia over the weekend, you bore witness to 3 days of uninterrupted victory laps by uh, the Biden administration, by the leftist media, the usual suspects. It's so funny too. You stop these phony audits and so on and so forth, but we agree with the results, so it's great. Now, don't do it again. We told you so. But this is a canned audit. This is a partisan audit. This is this. This is this. But it shows that Biden won the state by a couple hundred more votes than
previously thought.
Right, than previously recorded. And so, see, everything's fine. But then why are you afraid of audits? Because you're fiscal conservatives can't afford. Arizona can't afford $150,000 to do an audit of the 2020 election. That's big money.
Where
to
will
the
they
left,
find the
all
cash?
of a sudden.
Oh my gosh!
But here's my question to you all, to our listeners, to everybody. Do both President Trump and his evidence of widespread fraud response to the Maricopa County audit, as well as those who in the D.C. press corps, the punditocracy, there's no evidence of widespread fraud. 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 Are those claiming evidence of widespread fraud and those claiming no evidence of widespread fraud both wrong? In the sense that they can't prove their position. Not at present. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line. 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. So just a couple of bullets on what that audit found. And I know there's questions about the integrity of Cyber Ninjas, the firm that did the auditing, and their lack of experience doing this sort of thing. And I have questions too. And I have criticisms. But let's start with what it actually found before we get to that. As many as, and remember, this was a state decided by fewer than 11,000 votes. As many as 5,047 individuals voted in more than one county for up to 5,295 additional votes.
Okay.
393 voters cast ballots using incomplete names. 198 individuals who registered after the October 15th deadline voted anyway. 2,861 voters shared a registration number with another voter. 282 votes appeared to be cast in the names of dead voters. 186 voters appeared to have duplicate voter IDs, both of which were presented at separate times. So some back-of-the-envelope math there. You know, that's about 8,500 votes.
Okay, that were fraudulently cast.
And remember something else, too, because this is being presented in a way that is disingenuous, at least with respect to my perspective and most perspectives I talk to that are concerned about free and fair elections, which is to say, well, we're not trying to overturn the 2020 election. President Trump may be, but I'm not. I said this almost from the beginning. This is prospective in nature. This is to say what happened in 2020 should be examined because it was a watershed moment in the administration of elections in this country because it was majority mail-in. And if, number one, the left's attempt to federalize that elections and make it permanent should be sending up red flags if you're even-handed about free and fair elections and trying to prevent as few people from being disenfranchised, either through fraud or incompetence, as possible. I thought these are universal ends. Apparently not. It's just all about Trump lost, Trump lost, Trump lost, or Trump won, Trump won, Trump won, and he was frauded. No, it's not. That binary is false. It is also prospective in nature. What happened in some of these jurisdictions, don't want to see it happen again. There is a lot of room for improvement. There always is with government, which is why you've seen a couple of dozen states move in the direction of amending their election laws. But I don't see how you look at that. You know, if you accept the top line, I guess you can accept the top line, a few hundred more votes, and just dismiss all of these findings. I guess you can do that. I don't think that's particularly intellectually compelling, but I guess you can do that. But if you accept some of these findings and these individual findings that I just rattled off, I didn't hear much challenge to them because all anybody's interested in because they have the depth of a cookie tray in these circles that I'm talking about, the punditocracy and the DC press corps and the political class. Oh, they're interested in the top line. But I didn't see anybody challenging those findings on the merits. So for the sake of argument, let's say those findings are accurate. That's not a concern to anybody with respect to prospective administration of elections. And I know I've been through a few elections. I've run many, many campaigns.
Yes.
I was a candidate for office. I know this fairly well, and particularly in Illinois, you really know the vulnerabilities of an election system that's predicated on mistrust, like Illinois is in like almost nowhere else in the country. You really know it. I understand there's never going to be perfection, and there are going to be mistakes, and there are going to be recording errors, and there are going to be attempts to fraud the system. This is not trying to. This is not, unlike the left. I'm not going for zero COVID with respect to elections. I'm not going for zero mistakes. I'm not going for an invulnerable system, something that we can't do. But I am saying when you have these sorts of findings, they should be addressed to the best of our ability. They should be debated. We should discuss them. Are there ways, sensible ways to address these failures? And I'm not just talking about Maricopa County, but since that's front and center, let's use that as an example.
Right, but how are we still aligned? 282 dead people to vote? Like, how is that still happening? It's happening in Cook County. It's happening everywhere. But that's something you can work on. And then people, casting 2 ballots. The list goes on and on. I mean, we've got to stop voter fraud.
Right, and there's explanations for some of this. There's possible explanations. We don't know. There's possible explanation, and this comes from the audit too. There are ways a voter could receive their ballot, which in some cases would not violate the law, even if they were in some of these categories I just rattled off. College students move, but they could easily pick up ballots that were inadvertently sent home or to old roommates. Sure. People taking extended vacations, working remotely, address changes, and maybe there was more address changes last year because of the pandemic than usual. Sure. And the criticism is, well, the report offers no evidence to support fraud versus incompetence versus just sort of recording errors, because you're trying to catch up with some of these plausible explanations for why somebody appeared to receive a ballot illegally but maybe did not. Why are people so resistant? People in the Never Trump and the left, why are they so resistant to questions? I get if you're just going to, do this like as a football game, root for the home team. I'm rooting against Trump, I'm rooting for Trump, and that's all it is.
Yeah, but they should be caring about the process.
Well, right.
And to have secure elections. But even asking the question, the left freaks out.
Well, see, and I don't know.
That's the thing. I tried to have a conversation, about this, and then you don't believe he won? You're denying the election?
Right.
Oh, I bet you deny climate change too.
Big lie, big lie, big lie. Right. No questions will be entertained. And by the way, we're also going to federalize the elections. Well, why are you going to do that?
Yeah.
If there was no underlying problems,
then why do we need to federalize it?
No questions will be entertained. No improvements other than, basically anything goes, sort of the open border approach to elections without concern for fraud, incompetence, disenfranchisement as a result. I just don't find that particularly robust. I don't find that persuasive. And by the way, these are the same people saying Trump undermined our elections. He threatened our democracy. Our democracy is at stake. Our democracy is at stake. There's no widespread fraud, but our democracy is at stake, which is why we need to federalize elections, even though Trump undermined the elections at the local level. Nobody else did. Huh? I just can't follow these logical threads because they're not logical. They're ideological. They're all rooted in antipathy to Trump. And I don't hear any of those with antipathy to Trump going through some of these specific findings in this case study that we have and addressing them. Because it's just, I'm going to spike the football in Trump's face. We score, touchdown. That's how you're protecting our democracy? Really?
312-642-5600, turnkey.pro. Answer line 64636. Type in DA, then a quick comment.
And, and again, I don't think Trump is helping himself when he does and says certain things like he said in Georgia over the weekend. Stacey Abrams, maybe Stacey Abrams would be better than Brian Kemp. Maybe, Stacey Abrams as governor, that's fine with me. No, it's not.
Oh, please. Come on.
Unhelpful. It's too, and this is one of Trump's most problematic character flaws. It's all self-centered rather than prospective and bigger picture. The position he should be taking is, well, obviously, what I think, the position I'm taking, which is challenging the orthodoxy of the left on this issue of free and fair elections, using his bully pulpit to emphasize the importance of free and fair elections, and saying what happened in 2020 shouldn't happen again. We have findings that need to be addressed by serious people, state by state. There are more audits going on and of elections in 2022 and beyond. That's where he should be, I think. That's where we should be as serious people, and I think it would provide a nice contrast to how unserious, hysterical, and really ideological, driven by Trump hatred, so many on the left are, including sort of these quisling never-Trumpers. Joe in Tinley Park, you're on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Yeah, I could think of two maybe answers. Could we use our ATM machines somehow? And could we leave a fingerprint on our ballots?
Well, okay. Thanks for the call, Joe. Yeah, I mean, obviously you could make these things much more secure. I mean, you do have to balance some of what you would impose in terms of access. But, we're fighting it out over an ID. Much less anything.
Got a thumbprint. I don't know.
Yeah, and
that would have them up in arms.
Well, much less anything biometric.
Right.
I would be a little hesitant to provide biometric data to the state, which is what you're doing, right? I mean, just because I'm only giving you my fingerprint for the purpose of voting doesn't mean that's where it will stay in state hands.
Next thing you know, it's found at a crime scene.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what I say. So much of this is commonsensical and it's simple things. But it's just impossible to have reasonable conversations with people who want to force everything into the either or with Trump. It's just impossible to have conversations with these individuals because it's not either or Trump. The Republic is bigger than President Trump or any individual American. Nicholas in Streeterville.
How's it going, guys? I just have to say, since this topic could go on forever, but to jump right to it, thank you guys for talking about this. It seems like everyone is so quick to dismiss this topic as you're going to be called, non-patriotic or somebody that wants to take down America. It's just absolutely crazy what is going on, and I think that the majority of this country believes that this election in 2020 was not accurate, and that it needs to be looked into further. And the people that have the voice, such as yourselves, don't talk about it. And I really have been wondering, are there people at the top telling people like yourselves not to talk about it?
No, not here.
Very
other
great
stations.
for you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for the call, Nicholas.
Up the dial for sure. They
No.
told them absolutely don't. There's no denying the election results, and don't even question it.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, look, what did Fox News, the missive months ago, which is if you bring up election fraud, you're going to be immediately dismissed. WLS Radio did the same
Right.
thing. Everything's the big lie. Because why? We can't have like a reasonable conversation and ask questions about this? Everything to ask questions is to
Deny the results
is to
of the
be
election.
a collaborator with undermining our democracy. And by the way, so I'm happy to be critical of Trump where I think criticism is deserved, and I'm also happy to rally to his defense where the defense is deserved. So this story over the weekend, Donald Trump could be charged with multiple crimes over his attempts to overturn laws in Georgia. That is lunacy. That is insane. And that speaks to how unhinged the left and the never Trumpers are. There was no that Raffensperger call. We poured through that transcript. I can do it again. Happy to. There is no underlying crime. There was no meddling with the election. That was not political or extortion, much less meaning the legal definition of extortion or election interference. That's absurd. And by the way, not that, and you just heard me criticize Trump for his like Stacey Abrams tirade. You know, Stacey Abrams would be better than Kemp. No, she wouldn't. And it's a silly thing to say, and you should stop it. Because you need Kemp reelected, and you need Kemp to do well in Georgia, because you don't want Kemp to do poorly and drag down the Senate candidate, whoever that will be, Herschel Walker or somebody else, taking on Warnock. That is a seat that absolutely should be taken back in 2022, the Ralph Warnock seat in Georgia. There's no reason for it. There's no reason that he should hold it. And if you fail to get him in 2022, then you could be looking at Ralph Warnock in the Senate representing Georgia for a long time. So let's be prospective here. But Brian Kemp and others in Georgia, even if they're upset with Trump, this is an opportunity for them to be the bigger people and say, you know, some of what Trump has said has been unfair, but let me tell you something. This idea that he tried to interfere with the election, this idea that he could be charged with criminal offenses is ridiculous. Because it is. Scott and Aurora.
Yeah, I know this is a little off the subject, but if I'd love to know the Democratic primary, the numbers for that, because if they were to shove Joe Biden aside and Kamala Harris got in, would she be the first president in American history that absolutely nobody voted for?
All right, thanks, Scott. She definitely would have a primary. I agree with that. Dave in Wakanda. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
Yep, you're on.
Yes. Thanks for taking my call. I have a thought that the Democratic Party does not want to look into the election integrity because the preponderance of the votes that were inaccurate or incorrect were from the Democratic side, and they don't want to take that extra little boost of their votes to be scrutinized. So that's a possibility.
Thanks for the call, Dave. One thing, just a quick criticism I want to get into the audit. And I talked about this at the outset because I knew somebody that was sort of close to what was happening. And the batch adjudication, this is not the system, the voting software or the system was frauded. The system is set up to default based on where people make a mark on the ballot, right? Okay. And so you have a lot of people that make marks that are inscrutable, and so you have to have a way of processing them. But then you go back, particularly in an audit, and you should look at those ballots individually. And the initial report was looking at those ballots individually where there had to be an adjudication for whom was the vote cast. There were many that defaulted because of where the mark was to Biden that upon individual inspection looked more clearly for Trump. But batch adjudication, that issue of just pressing a button and adjudicating all ballots with questionable marks based on where the mark was, that was not examined by this audit. And that's not a real audit, because that's the whole point of going through this individually rather than just relying on the underlying technology. Kevin in Libertyville.
Good morning, guys. Hey, you want to look at this prospectively. If I'm reading your tone correctly, you want to say, okay, there were mistakes made in the past. We have to go forward and make sure that these same mistakes that were made in the past aren't made again. My issue with that whole philosophy is if you don't fix the mistakes in the past, meaning hold people accountable for cheating, for defrauding voters, for outright lying and manipulating ballots. If you do not hold them accountable, what do you have going forward? You have nothing, because there's nothing to stop them from doing it again.
I agree with that. I agree with that, Kevin. Thanks for the. I agree with that. And there's multiple ways to hold people accountable. One is at the ballot box. If it was lying, that's not a criminal offense. But to the extent that you can unearth actual criminal fraud, absolutely prosecute them. I mean, they do so in Texas and elsewhere. But there were some high-profile fraud cases from the last cycle prosecuted in Texas. Absolutely. This is not exclusive of holding people, individual officials accountable where there is evidence of professional misconduct or criminal misconduct.
Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Stop quoting Bill Maher, 636.
But now let's head into the newsroom. Here is Mike Scott.
61 degrees at 6:31. The NTSB says the Chicago to Seattle bound Amtrak train that derailed in northern Montana was not speeding. Democrat Senator John Tester has a farm about